Multiplying and dividing rational expressions. There are three topics we want to discuss in this lesson. First, multiplying rational expressions. Second, dividing rational expressions. And then converting units. Find the product of these two expressions. Well, anytime you multiply, the first thing you want to do is you want to factor first. Always factor first. Simplify second. Multiply third. So when you are multiplying rational expressions, factor first, simplify second, multiply third. That just makes it easier to do the problem. So first, I have this expression times this expression, and so when you multiply fractions, it's numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. Notice I have not multiplied yet, so we want to factor first. Those are all the factors of my 4x to the third times 3x plus 5, and then I factor my denominator as well. Second, simplify. The 2's reduced to 1. X divided by x reduces to 1. And lastly, multiply. 2 times x squared. You can leave your answer in this form, or you can actually distribute the 2x to the second to 3x and the 2x to the second to the 5. Sometimes my math lab will accept it just like this, or they might accept it in the actual distributed form. Find the product of these two rational expressions. It looks like it's a difficult problem, but keep in mind, factor first, simplify second, multiply last. So first, let's find the factors of this quadratic and this quadratic, this quadratic and this quadratic. Well, this is the difference of squares. This is the difference of squares. For the denominators, we do product sum, and the denominator here, we do product sum. And so remember, when you multiply two fractions, top times top, bottom times bottom. And then we're going to simplify what we can. If I have the same expression in the numerator and denominator and I'm multiplying, that will reduce to 1. So I have x minus 3 and x minus 3 reduced to 1, and 2x minus 5 and 2x minus 5 reduces to 1. Nothing else reduces. And I have my factored answer. And then lastly, you multiply. And we multiply by FOIL. And there's our answer. This is the exact same problem we just worked. The only difference is, once you find the product, we want to then do f times g of 2. So we take our 2 and plug it into our x value. And we had, if you remember, the simplified answer was x plus 3, 2x plus 5 over x plus 2 times x plus 7. So we plugged in our 2 in for our x, and simplify this. So f times g of 2 equals 5/4. To divide rational expressions is very similar to multiplying. There's only one additional step that must be done at the beginning. So anytime you divide fractions, that's the same as multiplying by the reciprocal of the second number. So if you notice, in this case, this is my second number. I'm going to convert this to multiplication by saying this fraction times the reciprocal of this fraction. So notice what I did here. I took this fraction and I found the reciprocal, which would be x plus 1 over 4x to the 7th. From this point, we do multiplication of rational expressions. First thing we do, factor first, simplify second, and multiply third. And we can factor this and we can simplify x squared and x squared from my numerator and denominator, and I can simplify a times 2 and a times 2 from my numerator and denominator. At this point you can FOIL. At this point you can distribute the 3 to everything inside the parentheses, and you can distribute this term to everything inside the parentheses, depending on what my math lab wants for their answer. All right, to simplify complex rational expressions. So say we have this. So we have really a fraction in the numerator and then a fraction in the denominator. This was called a complex rational expression. The reason it's complex is because it's not just a rational, but a rational expression inside a rational expression. So the first thing we want to do is we want to, since we're dividing, we want to multiply by the reciprocal of our denominator. But once we have a multiplication problem, we solve this the same way we did earlier. Factor first, simplify second, multiply third. So I can factor out an x from my numerator and my denominator, and I can factor out a 4 from my numerator and my denominator. I get this. So now let's find what happens when f divided by g of 4. So we take our value of 4 and plug it in for our x. We get 24. All right, unity fractions. This book calls it unity fractions. I like to call it unit fractions. Either way is acceptable. But a unit fraction, when the fraction in the numerator and the denominator are the same, and it can be reduced to 1. So for example, 3 feet is equivalent to 1 yard. So that's a unit fraction because I can reduce that to be 1. Even though I have different numbers and different units, they're equivalent and they're equal to 1. That is what's called a unit fraction. If 14.63 pesos equals $1, since they're equivalent to each other, they're equal to 1. And 2.54 centimeters is equal to 1 inch. Since they're equal to each other, I have the same amount in the numerator and the same amount in my denominator. It's equal to 1. That's what's called a unit fraction. And it's also very important to understand that unit fractions are equivalent to their reciprocals. Because if it's equal to 1, the reciprocal will also equal 1. So 1 yard over 3 feet, since they are the same, they're equivalent, it'll still equal 1. So unit fractions are equivalent to their reciprocals. All right, 3 steps in making conversions. First thing, the first step is always write down the number that you're converting into a fraction, and make sure you write that fraction over 1. And we'll give you examples in a second. So, for example, if I have 25 yards and I'm going to convert that to something, I'm going to write this as 25 yards over 1. So I'm going to write this as a fraction. Next, multiply the number that you're converting by the unit fraction. And lastly, simplify your product to get your answer. So let's look at an example. Convert 56 centimeters to inches. The first step, write down 56 centimeters over 1. Secondly, write the conversion. Now I will give you any conversions that you need on a test or a quiz. In this case, 2.54 centimeters equals 1 inch. So because 2.54 centimeters equals 1 inch, I will either multiply this fraction by this fraction, or I'll multiply this fraction by this fraction. How can you tell which one to multiply? Well, if you notice, I have centimeters in my numerator here. Whatever fraction I multiply by needs to have centimeters in the opposite position. So I'm not going to use this fraction. I'm going to use 1 inch over 2.54 centimeters. The reason I do that is because I will eliminate my centimeters, because centimeters divided by centimeters is 1. It reduces to 1. And I'm just left with inches, which is what I want. And then the centimeters reduce. And then my answer is going to be 56 times 1 divided by 2.54. And I can divide 56 divided by 2.54. So 56 centimeters will be equal to 22.047 inches. Let's do another one. 42 ounces to grams. So convert 42 ounces to grams. And I gave you the unit fraction or the unit conversion here. First thing, step 1, write down what you know as a fraction. 42 ounces over 1. Second, multiply this fraction by this unit fraction. Now, what number should be in my numerator and what number should be in my denominator for this unit fraction? Since I have ounces in my numerator here, I need to have ounces in my denominator here. And so I'm going to use this fraction. Because I need to have, since I'm getting rid of ounces and converting to grams, I need to have ounces in the opposite positions. And then ounces divided by ounces cancel out. I'm just left with 42 times 28.35 grams. Do the multiplication. So 42 ounces is equal to 1,190.7 grams. Please complete the My Math Lab out of lesson 7.2. Thank you.